celebrating SIX's 10th anniversary as an organization. Many of you, my first SIX conference was in 2016. It was about a month after Donald Trump was elected president. And I have such a tangible memory of coming to that event. It was before Jesse or Neha were here. And I was scared. I felt super alone. I was in a, combination frenetic, hopeless state that I think many of us might remember from that period. And I was only a year into my job at Local Progress, so I was still finding my steady footing. And in the period that I was finding my steady footing, my co-director, my colleague, and one of my best friends, Addie Barkin, was diagnosed with ALS tragically a month before the election. So it was a really devastating time for me across all levels. I was dealing with the twin grief of the election, of my friend Addie, and I was at this random conference that I knew I had to go to because I knew that SIX was this incredibly important organization and I knew the potential that it had. But I had barely met anybody here. I wasn't really sure what it was. And I gotta say, I came in and the keynote was dark. It was doom, it was gloom, it was Dems in disarray, blame, blame, blame. And I was okay, let me calibrate a minute and think about how to be in this moment. So I bring back that memory because today's session we're starting is the emphatic opposite of doom and gloom. We're starting our morning today focused on glimmers of hope for the future. And that shift from doom to hope is not an accidental hope, or not an accidental transition. It's an incredibly intentional one that has been built through the last 7 to 8 years of Jesse and Neha's leadership at this organization. And I think what's most important for us to hold in this moment is that transition is not delusional.
And so I wanted to share a little bit about that. When SIX was first formed, the idea was we need to have an organization that can counter ALEC. An important charge. Right? We see what happens in state houses when copycat legislation, bought and paid for by corporate lobbyists, get pushed around by our colleagues, introduced, and then we continue to see that we're in a defensive posture. So the charge was incredibly important. I think when our founders started the organization and merged the initial organizations, there was a sense, well, then let's just do what they do, right? Let's do copycat legislation, let's put a campaign in a box. And it's a very natural instinct. It's an important one, I get it. We still do exemplary policy with you all as legislators, but we've grown from that position for a very important reason, right? I think as we see the devastating impact.
Not just what their job is, their title is, or what they do from 9 to 5 or beyond. As complex individuals, we're the ones that actually make up the system, we're the ones that make the rules, we're the ones that actually collectively come together and build norms. And so if we're not transforming individuals to actually remain in a social contract with each other, the social contract is nil. And I think that's a little bit of what we're seeing, right? So when we talk about what does it require, that was a very deeply personal question for me as I thought about what it meant to lead. Because it's not enough just to say, I want to be a leader, or I want to be able to impact something, or hey, my title affords me the right and the opportunity to put my vision out there. That's actually not enough. You have to be in right relationship with the people that are standing right next to you. And to do that doesn't just mean listening and saying, how can I be your ally? Y'all, you have to do it.
So, I've had some time on my hands in the last few years. And one of the issues that is top of mind for me is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have been bamboozled into thinking that this is some recent phenomenon. DEI is 248 years old. We have had DEI since we've had this country, and we know it because everything we have done to shift this nation towards what it said it wanted to be, to create and manifest access to the American dream, which we can debate whether it's real or not, but the notion of it is out there. There are 3 ways you get there. Education, what you know, the economy, what you do, and elections, who has power. They have assiduously and aggressively attacked those 3 things because we have effectively, over the last 248 years, built a body of law to protect and defend and bring in, to call in our communities into power. So the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, but also Title I. Title I education, if, I don't know, you're vice president-elect who graduated from a poor school in the Appalachian Mountains, you are a DEI graduate. Because Title I was the DEI law. So is the Americans with Disabilities Act, so is the Family Medical Leave Act. Those are DEI laws, so when they say they're attacking DEI, they're attacking anything that has moved us from a moment where white men who owned land were the only ones with power in this country. Everything else is DEI. And so our responsibility is to not concede that we are afraid of DEI because they've gotten a few good headlines. DEI is in our DNA. It is how we have protected, defended, and expanded our access, and it's working. If it wasn't working, it wouldn't have been 35% of Project 2025. You don't fight over something you don't care about. And demography tells us that it's only going to get worse for those who want to return to a moment where those communities did not have access and power. So I've created a series of organizations known as the American Pride Rises Network, and I think you've heard from Deliver the American Dream is RC4, Defending American Values Coalition is RC3. We have a few other entities that are moving around quietly, but the mission is that we need to not only defend, we need to expand DEI in this country. And that begins, thank you, and that begins by not giving up the name. Changing the name of DEI, the one they're putting out there is MEI, Merit, Excellence, and Intelligence, which
they have none of.
Merit based on what, excellent based on which measure, and intelligence is, there are, anyway. Suffice it to say, changing our name, changing the call to action. Diversity means all people, equity means fair access to opportunity, and inclusion means creating a pathway for anyone to get to their American dream. I fundamentally, aggressively, and vehemently oppose changing it, because that's like changing your name because a bully mocks you. They're just gonna mock the new name and make fun of you for changing it. That said, there is also an expansion opportunity, and I will turn it over to my friend to talk about the expansion.
Everybody gets to express their joy, their vitality, and most of all, their kindness towards each other. Where things like honor and integrity are taken for granted instead of being bitterly fought over. I want a future where everybody gets to decide what happens to their own bodies. I want a future where people aren't in pain for being trapped in what they feel is the wrong body. And there's just so much I want. And I'm like you though, because I'm a sci-fi girl. I actually write it, and I majored in chemistry and physics, so I'm real left brain. And I want a future as good as Star Trek promises.
I'm smart enough not to go after that. So I'm more pedestrian in my intentions. My work is driven by the fact that I think poverty is immoral. I think it is economically inefficient. I think it is a waste of human capital. I think it squanders potential, and it limits our achievements. And so the eradication of poverty for me is the driving mission. I've rejected my entire life. The first time I heard the scripture in Matthew, the poor will always be among you, it was never intended as an excuse. It was a call to action. And the work that I do, the world I believe in, the world I imagine, is one where poverty is eradicated, and not just material poverty, but poverty of imagination, poverty of spirit, the notion that we are in a zero-sum society, that my success demands your oppression. And so how do we eliminate poverty as a native good? And how do we do everything in our power to demand this abundance of access, an abundance of opportunity, an abundance of imagination so that we are able to get to the transporters that we deserve and the food replicators I've been waiting for. How do we make the world a place where poverty is no longer a given, and instead it's an insult, and that's the world I want.
Please tell us, what is SIX all about?
So SIX, which also stands for State Innovation Exchange, is a strategy and network center for state elected officials across the country who are interested in sharing a progressive space for shared ideology and values and advancing bold policies across the nation for all people.
What does a conference like this, SIX, exactly do? Can you explain to us in layman's terms?
Sure. So first and foremost, it's a gathering place. It's a place where state electeds can meet each other, talk about their common challenges, common successes, share resources, share ideas, share policies, and share strategies for how they're actually moving policies forward. So that's one. The second thing that it's actually a place where we get to dream about new ideas. So it's not just what do we not want to do, but it's actually a space to say what do we want to do for the future. And third, it's a place to actually start getting organized. And what it made me organized is that you have people from 48 states coming together and everyone thinks that they're alone. And in some states you have legislators who've either been first time elected or they've been elected and they've been in office for several years, or they're the first. And that requires community. And in community we come up with our best ideas, as we know. And in communities where we find safety, it's where we find support, it's where we find our minds can be shifted. And so this space actually is a place where people can do that, but also learn about tools, tactics, strategies for ways to actually bring those policies to realities for our communities.
So this is your 10th year anniversary. So please tell us about the highlights of this event.
Oh
We're
my
just
goodness.
closing up.
We are. Highlights of this event. Well, I have been leading SIX for almost 8 years now. And so to see the trajectory of where we're at now 8 years later, SIX was just an idea. And the idea that actually solutions come from local communities, people who are directly impacted by the things that are happening around the world are actually the people who should be coming up with solutions. State electeds are part of that solution. We are not separate from community. So the idea is that state elected officials and community members should be working in partnership from the very beginning to think about what policies matter most to communities. To me, that has been the most important shift for SIX over the last 10 years. And today, I think that's what we celebrated over the last week.
Wonderful. So far in your journey, what would you say is the highest achievement of SIX so far?
Oh gosh.
So many.
Well, I will say, I think the work doesn't stop at an event. So I think the highest achievement of SIX is that almost 600 lawmakers and movement actors are going to leave this place. And already from January, we're going to be in community and conversation and connection, ideas, strategies, but we organize year round. And so the highlight is expanding the network of people that actually do want to engage SIX. There's so many first-time legislators, so many first-time attendees of SIX's conference that said, how can we be in right relationship? How do we actually talk to the people in communities and create spaces where they're telling us the truth? And I think if we're doing that in more expanded ways, that to me is the greatest achievement of SIX. We've grown from a network of what started was, I think, a staff of 7, a network of maybe a couple hundred legislators, to now a network of over 12,000 legislators and movement activists that are regularly receiving information about SIX. Out of the 7,500 plus state legislators around the country, we're reaching about half. And so I think expanding that network feels important. It's our greatest achievement, and yeah, building that community feels like the right thing to do.
Well, congratulations, Neha, and thank you for talking to NRI Pulse.
Thank you so much for having me.